Welcome to the Cinema 4D Nodes course, where we explore one node at a time at a pace that anyone can handle. And today we're going to be actually exploring how to work with capsules inside of Cinema 4D. It's a very intuitive method of working with nodes, but within your object manager, which is similar to many other tools inside of Cinema 4D. And by the way, you don't need to be a top-tier 3D modeler in order to learn this. You just need a tour guide, like on vacation, in order to not get lost and to focus on enjoying the sunshine and the waves and the beach and the birds singing. That way you can focus on exploring rather than being lost with everyone, arguing over the map and who is reading it correctly. So here I'm your tour guide for Cinema 4D and nodes. And if you have any questions, please feel welcome to leave them in the comments below. If you'd like additional help beyond that, you can join one of our live Q&A sessions or book me for a one-on-one coaching on ambient3danimations.com. Here we are within Cinema 4D, and we're going to exploring these two different methods here. So in the past episode, we had used cloners and gone over how to use a cloner to create these countertops and variations within the scenes. Here we're going to break down the differences between working with the nodes mesh and nodes. So you can see in here, I have all of these nodes set up, and we've covered all of these within this course. So if you've been following along, you're an expert on these. And instead of breaking down all the individual settings of each one of these tools in here, I'm going to be focusing more on the workflow differences between working with nodes in here with your nodes mesh versus working with capsules inside of Cinema 4D. Because you'll notice that the settings for using these tools, like if I click on the geometry axis node, the settings in here are the same as if I click on the geometry axis as a capsule. So the settings are the same basically between these two. So the main difference is that we are relying on hierarchy inside of the capsules, inside the object manager when working with these tools there, versus relying on these ports and connecting them inside of here. So that's the main difference. So you actually already know all these settings for these tools that we're going to be going over today. So here you'll see this is the countertop we've created using capsules. And this is the countertop we've created with the nodes mesh. So they look identical. You can do this either way. There's just a few little differences I'd like to point out. Up here, when you're working with nodes, you'll need a nodes mesh, which is a way to group all your nodes within an object. In the case of working with capsules, you don't need a nodes mesh. And you can see that I just started building these from the very first step, which is dropping in a cube. I'm going to turn off the connect for a moment by checking this arrow here. We'll go in greater depth of how that works in a moment. You can see my cube node is right over here. And the settings for that are the same as if we use the cube node in here. So if I were to go into the object manager, I just like to show you that you can drop these both in here and within your scene here. So there's two different ways of working with these, and you can really drop them in either place. And by the way, I'm within the nodes and within the geomesh. So if you're looking for that, you can find it in there, along with all the other nodes that were dropped in here. You'll find them within the different folders, the same space as where we were when we covered these for node use. You'll notice another difference between working with the nodes and working with the capsules. And that's the order in which I put these in. Instead of relying on these ports, the order is very important. So I'm actually going to go ahead and turn these off, and I'll talk through the process one by turning these on. So initially, I just dropped a cube into the scene. And then in order to have the geometry axis act upon that, I dropped that within the hierarchy of the cube capsule here. So I can go ahead and turn that on. That locks it into space so that it lines up with the floor. And I use the same settings for the selection string of 2 and 6 in here. Now I wanted to select a face, similar as when we worked with nodes. So I added in a select facing, and I placed that underneath the geometry axis. So that way, this is affecting what's above it. So you can see that this is our order of operations here. First is the geometry axis. Second is the select facing. And then after that procedure, I had split it using the select facing. You can see this is set to default so that we're using that select facing here. And then in order to extrude, I can turn this on. You can use all within the selection string. I'm going to show you something else fun. When we created the select facing, we also created this selection tag down here and named it top and bottom. The same thing we did with nodes. And up here on our cube, we also have the top and bottom selected. So when we go into extrude, instead of typing in all or default, another option is you can drag and drop this tag into here, and you'll see it says top and bottom, and it's grabbing that selection and extruding it. So that's another way you can work within your selection string. That's very useful. Here within the select, I'm going to turn this on, and here I'm selecting 2 and 4. So you can work with your select inside of here if you would like. And we are now extruding that. So you can see we're extruding that top part of the counter. And then I'm storing this as a selection, creating an additional tag for granite so that I can texture this whole section as granite. So that's the first section. Now you'll notice that things are a little bit different when it comes to the split, because instead of like what we did down here, where we split into the granite section and the wooden section, here we operated a little bit differently. I actually created another cube and created this separately, and then at the end I connected them together, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in that process. So I added in another cube, same settings as before. I added in the geometry axis, same thing as before, I'll check that on. Added in the select facing, same thing as before. I split it, and now I used a different setting. I used the swap. So now we are working with the bottom of the counter. So that's the way I had set that apart. Instead of doing this procedure here, I did this and created a second cube. And I'll bring these together at the end with the connect. For the inset, I'll go ahead and check this on. You can see that the sides are now being inset. We extruded them in to create some more depth and detailing in here. We created a store selection. So you can see that we're following all the same steps as prior in here. And now we're actually to this part with the store selection. And you can see I added in the selection string. This is the same as before. Created a name for it, wood grain runs vertical. Same settings for both of these, as node or as capsule. And you'll see this is here, and I applied it to a material, so you can see that that is applied to our actual model. wood grain runs horizontal is within the material tag. Here you can see I added in a second store selection. This one is named invert. And I relied mainly on the selection string here since that is a lot easier with Capsules. Here with nodes inside of Cinema 4D. You'll notice that I used the invert selection and the store selection. And it's a lot easier to set that up here with nodes because you can connect this one to this one and connect this one to this one. And it's very clear for Cinema 4D. But since we have so much going on in here, I decided to rely on store selection and inverting it within the actual selection string itself, rather than using one of these tools here. So you'll see that I did something a little bit different here in the selection string. So this is new information. I did all minus wood grain runs vertical. So all minus wood grain runs vertical is the selection tag over here. I just dragged and dropped that in here. And then I renamed this new selection wood grain runs horizontal because it's the reverse of what we needed here. And that way I can create a new selection and use that. You'll see that it's actually within here. I have horizontal and vertical in here for the wood grain. And then I could drag and drop this tag in here as the selection, and then it works. There's another difference I'd like to point out to you. So you'll notice that for the connect in here, let's go in here. If I search for connect, you'll see that I can drag and drop the connect in here as a node. But when I hover over the object manager, you'll see that I get this symbol here basically saying we cannot drag and drop this into our objects manager. So you might be wondering why and how I got the connect in here. Well, this connect isn't a node. I actually used a generator for this, and I created a whole other video on all the settings for the connect generator inside of Cinema 4D. I'm going to leave that in the description below for those of you who want to learn that. But for right now, I just want you to be aware that some of these tools in here are actually also generators in here. So Maxon just made this as a separate node and a separate generator. So what are generators? Well, generators are a tool. You can actually find them within here. These are all your generators in here. You'll see they're all labeled green, so that's really helpful to know what's what inside of here. Generators are green, and you'll see we have our connect. So I can just drag my mouse here, let go of it, and then I'll add another connect in here. So generators generate geometry, and you can apply them to other objects. So the way generators work is you actually need to add the object that you're affecting within the hierarchy of the generator. And some examples or generators is the thicken. You can thicken geometry with this. Spline mask, you can create masks with splines. Loft, you can loft different splines in order to create new forms. And actually, most of these I've covered on my YouTube channel already. So if you're wanting to explore them, you definitely can. I have a ton of videos on these. So if I want this connect object to affect this cube that I've split to be the top and this other cube that I've split to be the bottom, and what if we want this to be all one mesh together? Well, we can do that with the connect. And for Phong mode, I chose manual, but you'll see that you have these different options here. And I'll also leave a link to the episode covering what Fong means. And the connect generator can weld, and you can check your tolerance here. So that's a way to connect these points here and make this all one mesh. And you can see we did that with nodes over here. We connected the top section, the granite, with the bottom to make it all one object. If you are interested in another course on nodes, please let me know. This was a beginner course to get you used to using these so that you feel comfortable and you get the workflow. Of course, there's a ton more nodes, and I'm happy to dive into those. If that's an interest of yours, please let me know. Congratulations on finishing the Cinema 4D Nodes course. I'm so excited that you've made it this far, and I hope you are excited as well. You can check out more lessons from this course up here, and you can also check out the Connect Node video over here. So I hope to see you there. Thank you so much.